There is a town in Pennsylvania where late-night hospital nurses call ahead, not to check inventory, but to make sure the street outside is safe to walk across. There is an independent borough where locals actively route their GPS around an invisible municipal boundary to avoid specific intersections. And there is a city that literally chokes on the burning trash of the wealthy counties surrounding it. We talk about dangerous towns as if the crime just appeared one day. We talk about it as if it rained down on a specific zip code and soaked into the ground and simply became the local weather. But what nobody wants to admit is that none of this happened by accident. Every single one of these towns was built this way on purpose. These are 15 Pennsylvania towns so dangerous that locals will not drive through at night. And this is the real story of the political and corporate decisions that designed them. Number 15. Aliquippa. Every state has a town with a population of roughly 9,000 that the rest of the state uses as a cautionary tale. Locals do not describe the entire city as uniformly dangerous. They describe specific avenues, vacant blocks, and corners after certain hours. This is local, generational knowledge. You can still see faded, peeling murals of steelworkers on the side of abandoned brick buildings along the main avenue. This is block-by-block knowledge passed from parent to child like directions. Turn left here. Do not stop there. Do not get out of the car at that light. Aliquippa consistently ranks among Pennsylvania's most dangerous small cities per capita. The danger did not arrive randomly. Aliquippa is a company town. Jones and Laughlin Steel built this place to forge the bones of the American century. At its peak, the steelworks stretched for 7 miles along the banks of the Ohio River, employing 15,000 people. The city was constructed for a singular purpose, drawing tens of thousands of workers to the region. But when the steel industry collapsed in the 1980s, the economic foundation shattered. Drone footage flying over the rusted remains of an industrial park tells the story perfectly. The company left. The people stayed. They had built lives. Their children went to school here. You do not simply dismantle a community because a corporation has renegotiated its interest in the riverbank beneath it. A retired mill worker who now drives a local school bus knows every block. He knows which ones he slows down for and which ones he does not stop at. He knows the mill used to give Aliquippa a reason, and now it mostly gives it a memory. The people most endangered by the crime in Aliquippa are the residents themselves. The real danger is that nobody outside it seems to care enough to trace the struggle back to the day the furnaces went cold. Number 14. Newcastle. In Newcastle, a city of 21,000 people, the night shift changes everything. Late-night convenience store employees say they call ahead before driving to work. They do not call to check inventory. They call to check on the block outside. Newcastle's violent crime severity consistently outpaces the state average, a sharp contrast to the quiet agricultural townships that surround it in Lawrence County. 100 years ago, this city was the tin plate capital of the world. It drew immigrants from across Europe to work in the massive rolling mills that lined the Shenango River. It sits at the exact geographic intersection of Route 422 and the Ohio border. It was built as a transition point for manufacturing. When the factories shuttered, the physical geography remained. Today, looking at a map of a deserted downtown intersection, Newcastle sits as an efficient logistics node for trafficking networks moving between Youngstown, Ohio, and Pittsburgh. Distribution networks need nodes. Newcastle is geometrically inevitable as one. The highway connects the supply directly to the demand, and Newcastle just happens to be the halfway point. A nurse who works nights at the local hospital knows what comes through the emergency room after midnight. The ER after midnight tells you everything the city's daytime face tries to hide. She has worked there for over a decade, and she still takes a different route home, depending on what kind of night it has been. Newcastle is where the Rust Belt's unresolved logistics go to live. There is a reason this story is still talked about today. The highway dictates the town's reality. Locals in Darby use a specific word for the border they share with Philadelphia. They call it the line. You do not need them to explain what that means. The name tells you everything about what concentrates there after dark. Derby's violent crime rate runs exponentially higher than the national average. For a borough of barely 10,000 people packed into dense row homes with narrow streets, those numbers represent a level of daily exposure to violence that most Pennsylvanians in larger suburbs will never experience personally. It sits directly on the edge of southwest Philadelphia, separated only by Cobb's Creek. Post-war redlining and municipal fragmentation packed severe economic distress right against the city line. Delaware County is full of immense wealth. If you drive just 15 minutes west, you will find sprawling estates and elite private schools. But the tax base in Derby has been systematically starved for generations. Picture a wealthy Delaware County estate sitting just a few miles away from a crumbling Derby sidewalk. The contrast is jarring. A third-shift transit worker riding the trolley down Main Street knows the addresses change, but the poverty just spills over the border. The system treats Derby like a containment zone for the city's overflow. When you starve a municipality of property taxes and civic investment for 60 years, you do not get to be surprised by what grows in the cracks. Everything functions exactly the way the zoning laws intended. Number 12. Coatesville. There are two versions of Chester County. There is the daytime version, a sprawling, wealthy suburban enclave with equestrian farms, luxury estates, and some of the highest median incomes in the United States. And then there is Coatesville, a city of 13,000 residents. Driving down Route 30, the scenery transitions from rolling green hills to dense, faded industrial housing. Coatesville records per capita violent crime rates that completely defy the wealth of the county surrounding it. Look at a map. Route 30 runs right past it, actively bypassing the downtown corridor. Coatesville was built around Lucan steel, which rolled the steel plates for the World Trade Center and military submarines. It was an industrial powerhouse surrounded by agrarian wealth. But when the industrial boom faded, the wealth of Chester County essentially walled Coatesville off. The surrounding townships passed strict zoning laws, ensuring affordable housing remained concentrated within the city limits of Coatesville, while the wealth stayed in the suburbs. It is an island of historical neglect in an ocean of mainline money. A community outreach worker drives the city at night, distributing harm reduction supplies. She has done this for years. She knows most people she sees are not dangerous. They are in danger. Coatesville is what happens when a wealthy county decides to keep its poverty neatly contained in a 2-square-mile valley. If you are finding this deep dive into the hidden history of American cities helpful, hit the subscribe button right now. I break down the real systems building the world around you every single week. Now, what comes next is the part that still does not make sense. Number 11. Johnstown. Johnstown, home to 18,000 people, has a reputation among Pennsylvanians that its own residents find simultaneously understandable and deeply unfair. It is a city famous for the catastrophic 1889 flood that wiped out thousands of lives. But the locals will tell you the water is not what drowned the town. An aerial view looking down into the steep green valley that surrounds Johnstown shows exactly why. Johnstown's violent crime and property crime rates consistently place it among the state's most struggling small cities. It sits at the bottom of a deep river valley in the Alleghenies. That is not a metaphor. It is the explanation. When Bethlehem Steel and the local coal mines closed in the late 20th century, the economy did not just collapse, it was geographically trapped. You cannot accidentally drive through Johnstown. You have to navigate winding mountain roads. You have to mean to go there. When the jobs left, the only thing that rushed in to fill the vacuum in that valley was the opioid epidemic. A downtown diner owner with an old neon sign buzzing in the rain has operated on the same block for 25 years. He watched the change happen incrementally. Not one dramatic moment, just a slow, relentless shift in what the street looked like at 10 o'clock at night. The daytime city and the nighttime city stopped resembling each other somewhere around 15 years ago. Johnstown absorbed all the economic devastation of the 1990s. What remains is exactly what you would expect the bottom of a valley to look like. But the state was not done yet. Not even close. Number 10. Norristown. Let me be precise about Norristown, a borough of 35,000 people, because precision is what this city's story requires. After dark, specific downtown corridors carry a danger that is documented, reported, investigated, and largely unaddressed. Norristown frequently records crime rates that starkly contrast with the affluent Montgomery County suburbs that surround it. You can drive 5 minutes from a neighborhood of million-dollar homes and suddenly find yourself surrounded by boarded-up windows. If you look at a map of Montgomery County, highlighting Norristown in the center, you realize it is the county seat. Montgomery County is one of the wealthiest counties in America, but over the decades, it concentrated its courthouses, its county jails, its halfway houses, its bail bondsmen, and its social services all within the small borders of Norristown. The county outsourced its entire institutional burden to a single municipality. I mean, think about that for a second. People stand outside bail bonds offices, smoking cigarettes on the sidewalk in the shadow of a massive, pristine county courthouse. A legal aid worker who has spent her career in the borough knows the reality. The people who come through the criminal justice system in Norristown are not running toward something. They are trapped in the only zip code in the county that allows them to exist. The danger here is the bill for an entire county's refusal to build affordable housing or social infrastructure anywhere else. Norristown did not fail. The county used it as a warehouse and then expressed shock at what a warehouse looks like at midnight. Number 9. Erie. Erie is not uniformly dangerous. That is the first thing its 93,000 residents will tell you, and they are completely right. The second thing they will tell you is that specific blocks off the bayfront after 11 at night carry a concentrated risk that the rest of the city's statistics do not fully reflect. Look at the Interstate 90 corridor. Erie connects Cleveland to Buffalo and Pittsburgh to New York. It sits alone at the absolute top of the state, battered by brutal lake-effect winters that physically isolate the city for months at a time. Density without investment creates pressure points. When the massive General Electric manufacturing plants on the east side scaled back, eliminating thousands of middle-class union jobs, the civic infrastructure meant to support those neighborhoods lagged behind by decades. The result was a physical divide. The Bayfront received tourism dollars and luxury hotels, while the East Side neighborhoods were left to manage the economic fallout alone. A local youth advocate who grew up on the East Side knows the monolithic Erie narrative is a simplification that costs the city real resources. Dangerous and home are not opposites. Sometimes they are the same address, and you learn to navigate both. Now let us talk about the fault lines of history. Up to this point, the state had been winning the industrial race. That was about to flip. Erie is forced to spend decades outrunning a narrative it did not author, built on the fallout of global trade decisions made thousands of miles away. Number 8. York. York, a city of 44,000 people, should not be on this list. It is a historic city surrounded by rich agricultural land. It appears in history books as the first capital of the United States, where the Articles of Confederation were drafted. And yet, locals describe an after-dark reality that the tourism brochures do not include. Walk past the historic colonial brick buildings and down a quiet, historically segregated street, and you find a violent crime rate per capita that places York among Pennsylvania's most struggling mid-sized communities. It sits on a fault line of historical racial inequity that was never resolved. In 1969, the city was torn apart by race riots. The systemic redlining that preceded those riots, the physical segregation of neighborhoods, the use of police dogs against residents, and the deliberate withholding of capital from Black communities were heavily documented. That infrastructure of exclusion was not an accident, it was a plan, and the plan worked exactly as designed. The scars from that era are still visible in the architecture and the city planning. A York resident whose family has lived there for 4 generations draws a straight line from the 1969 riots to the conditions on the street tonight. That line is not complicated. It is just long. York performs a historic, polite version of itself for the daytime, while leaving the bill for 70 years of segregation to be paid in the dark by people who had no hand in designing it. People from Pittsburgh will tell you they do not stop in McKeesport after dark. Let that specific detail carry its full weight for a moment. Residents of a major metropolitan area actively avoid a small town of 17,000 people. McKeesport's crime severity index places it among the state's most dangerous communities, with a consistency that removes any possibility of statistical anomaly. It sits where the Monongahela and Youghiogheny rivers meet, brown water swirling under a rusted suspension bridge. At its peak, National Tube Works employed nearly 10,000 people here. McKeesport was the epicenter of the Mon Valley steel boom, producing the pipes that built the nation's infrastructure. When U.S. Steel collapsed in the 1980s, it did not just take the jobs, it took the tax base, the public transport, and the civic future. The population plummeted, leaving thousands of abandoned homes to rot on the steep hillsides overlooking the river. A former steel worker who now works overnight security at an empty lot knows what passes through his town between midnight and dawn. The rivers used to carry steel barges. Now they just hem the poverty in. The pieces were assembled here by industry. The consequences were not a surprise to anyone paying attention. McKeesport did not choose to be abandoned. It simply lives with what that abandonment delivers every single night. Allentown looks on a map like a booming logistics hub. It does not look on a map like somewhere that belongs in a national conversation about danger. The map is insufficient context. Allentown, home to 125,000 people, routinely records crime rates in specific downtown wards that deeply contrast with its revitalized commercial districts. Massive, windowless Amazon fulfillment centers and FedEx warehouses sit just a short drive from luxury downtown lofts, which are only 2 blocks away from boarded-up storefronts. Billy Joel wrote a song about this city in 1982 that became a cliché, but the song was entirely accurate. The manufacturing base left. Today, the Lehigh Valley is the warehouse capital of the East Coast. Because of its proximity to New York and Philadelphia, logistics companies have devoured the landscape. But warehouse jobs do not build generational wealth the way unionized manufacturing did. They build transient, precarious economies. Workers are subjected to grueling quotas, temporary contracts, and high turnover rates. A local bartender who has worked off Hamilton Street for 20 years watched the aftermath of this transition. The city built shiny new sports arenas and luxury lofts, but left the surrounding blocks to fend for themselves. Allentown is 2 cities sharing one postal code. The dangerous one is the one that gets set aside so the other one can keep selling tax-abated real estate to developers from New York. And the timing of what happened next? Almost too perfect. Number 5. Reading. The danger in reading is not random, it is measured. In 2011, the United States Census declared reading the poorest city in the nation for its size. Poverty and crime are not the same thing, but poverty is the soil that crime grows in. After dark, specific corridors in Reading carry a concentrated risk that is documented and largely unaddressed. You can see endless rows of identical, aging brick row homes stretching up a steep hill. They were built by the Reading Railroad. It was a textile and manufacturing giant that literally put its name on the monopoly board. When those industries fled, they left behind a massive stock of aging homes and a hollowed-out middle class. Reading became a destination for people priced out of New York and Philadelphia, seeking affordable housing. They arrived only to find a city of 94,000 starved of the municipal resources required to support them. This decision seemed small at the time. It wasn't. A paramedic who has worked the streets of Reading for 12 years knows the math of a single shift. The calls, the responses, the violence born of absolute economic desperation. The hardest part is knowing the system is not designed to break the cycle. It is designed to interrupt it temporarily with Narcan and bandages. Reading is what happens when a city decides quietly across decades that its poorest residents are not worth the infrastructure required to catch them. Number 4. Wilkinsburg. Wilkinsburg is not in any state tourism brochure. It is an independent borough of 14,000 people that shares a direct border with Pittsburgh. Residents of Pittsburgh's wealthy East End neighborhoods will actively route their GPS to avoid driving through Wilkinsburg at night. Driving down Penn Avenue, you cross a border where the road quality visibly degrades. The streetlights literally change color. The violent crime statistics here are disproportionate in ways that demand explanation beyond individual choices. It is the ultimate victim of municipal border warfare. In Pennsylvania, boroughs operate their own schools, their own police, and their own taxes. When white flight struck in the 1970s and 80s, wealth retreated across the border into Pittsburgh or further into the eastern suburbs. They left Wilkinsburg with crumbling infrastructure and absolutely no tax base to fix it. Because the property values collapsed, the borough had to raise tax rates to astronomical levels just to keep the streetlights on, which only drove more businesses away. The ironic detail is that the border is invisible on a map, but physical in reality. A local community advocate points out the exact line where the streetlights get dimmer and the potholes get deeper. The danger in Wilkinsburg is the direct result of a fragmented government system. A system that allows rich neighborhoods to hoard their wealth and tell poor neighborhoods to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. The danger did not grow here naturally. It was zoned into existence. Number 3. Harrisburg. Harrisburg will surprise you. It has a magnificent Capitol dome that mirrors St. Peter's Basilica. It has state workers in tailored suits walking well-paved streets. And yet, blocks away from the legislative chambers, locals navigate around specific neighborhoods rather than through them. With the Capitol building looming large in the background, the foreground shows a street corner with broken pavement and people loitering. The violent crime rate in the capital city of 50,000 people consistently outpaces the rest of Dauphin County. It is the seat of state power. But the state pays almost no property taxes on the massive footprint of government buildings it occupies. For decades, the city was financially suffocated. To try to generate revenue, city leaders borrowed hundreds of millions of dollars to upgrade a trash incinerator. It was a complete disaster. In 2011, the city was so broke, it tried to file for bankruptcy, dragged down by a catastrophic debt project. So yeah, not great. A local journalist who covered the financial collapse understands the cruel irony of the city's geography. Politicians write laws about public safety in a marble building, while 3 blocks away, streetlights stay broken because the city could not afford to pay the electric bill. The danger in Harrisburg is structural. It is the danger of a government that occupies a city but refuses to sustain it. Number 2. Chester. Chester is Pennsylvania's oldest city. Today, it is its most heavily documented municipal failure. After dark, the streets of Chester carry a specific danger that is reported on, investigated, and practically ignored by the state at large. Chester records homicide and violent crime rates that rival the most dangerous cities in America. Look at the Delaware River waterfront. Chester was a shipbuilding empire. Sun Shipbuilding and Ford Motor Company had massive plants here. When the industries left, they did not just leave empty buildings. They left toxic soil and political corruption. Chester became the dumping ground. Literally. Interstate 95 traffic speeds past a massive trash incinerator facility. It houses one of the largest incinerators in the country, burning garbage from surrounding wealthy counties and states along the eastern seaboard. If that sounds bad, keep watching. A lifelong resident and environmental activist knows the absolute indignity of Chester's position. The rest of the state sends Chester, a city of 32,000 people, their trash, their pollution, and their apathy. Rates of childhood asthma here are astronomical. And then, the people who created that trash lock their car doors when they drive through on the highway. The danger in Chester is the direct result of a state that decided an entire city was an acceptable sacrifice for industrial convenience. Chester is a city choking on the exhaust of the American dream. Number 1. Philadelphia, specifically the Kensington neighborhood. Philadelphia is a historic, vibrant city, but Kensington is the most documented urban crisis in America. This is not hyperbole. It has been studied, reported, filmed by drones, and analyzed more thoroughly than almost any comparable geography on Earth, and it is still getting worse. If you take a slow panning shot under the elevated train tracks of the Market-Frankford line, shadows hide the crowded sidewalks. After dark, beneath that train, the concentration of human suffering visible on a single avenue represents a policy failure so complete that it has become its own category of American shame. It was the heart of the workshop of the world. It housed textile workers, machinists, and factory laborers. When the factories closed, the bottom fell out. In the 2000s, it became the epicenter of the East Coast heroin trade, and then fentanyl, and now the animal tranquilizer xylazine. The city's approach for decades was essentially a policy of geographic containment. Keep it under the L. Keep it out of Center City. It was a geographic quarantine. Imagine tourists taking photos at the Liberty Bell in downtown Philadelphia, while just miles away, paramedics rush to an overdose victim under the train tracks. A harm reduction nurse who works under the train tracks knows the hardest part is not the overdoses. It is the realization that the system functions exactly as it is currently designed. The containment works. The rest of the city gets to thrive because Kensington absorbs the entirety of the region's trauma, addiction, and poverty. The danger in Kensington is not what happens when people fail. It is what happens when a society decides, quietly, across decades, that an entire zip code of human beings is not worth the infrastructure required to save them. Every town on this list shares something that does not appear in any crime severity index. Each one is dangerous in a specific, traceable way that connects directly to a decision made somewhere by someone that was never reversed. We talk about dangerous towns as though the danger grew there naturally, as though it rained down on a specific postal code, soaked into the ground, and became the local weather. It did not. Someone built the conditions. A highway was routed, a steel mill was opened and then shuttered without a transition plan. Redlining concentrated poverty into a river valley. Wealth retreated across a municipal border. A county shipped all its problems to a single zip code. Someone made each of these decisions, and then they drove home to a different postal code. The night reveals what the day is organized to conceal. When the businesses close and the services shut down and the official version of a city goes home, what remains on those streets is the accumulated consequence of choices that were made in rooms most of us will never enter, by people most of us will never meet. These stories are not unique. This pattern repeats in every Rust Belt state, revealing exactly what a system looks like when it abandons its foundation. So when a local tells you they will not drive through a certain street after dark, the question is not what is wrong with that street. The question is which decision built it, who made that decision, what alternatives existed that were not chosen, and whether anyone has ever been genuinely held accountable for the gap between what was promised and what was delivered. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next videos. I will see you in the next one.